LeBron James and Kevin Durant are about to face off for the 47th time, but this one doesn't look like the rest. No Luka Doncic, no Austin Reaves, just a 41-year-old LeBron trying to lead the Lakers past an athletic, defensive-minded Rockets team led by KD, which raises the question, who really has the advantage? In today's video brought to you by PrizePicks, we're going to break down exactly what you can expect to see and figure out who has the upper hand. LA's offense throughout the year had been built around Luka's spread pick and roll game. Naturally, against the Rockets, that meant pulling Şengün out to the perimeter, attacking his foot speed, and creating downhill pressure. When he's not out there, that's what Reaves is looking to do. But without either, that's when everything changes. LeBron isn't a pull-up shooting threat, so Şengün doesn't have to step out. Instead, they're going to soft switch these screens, then crowd the paint with help. And the idea here is to not let him turn the corner with a numbers advantage. By switching, you can force him to play one-on-one from the perimeter, where his loss of burst and change of direction over the years have turned him into less of an imminent threat. Instead, a LeBron-led offense at this point is all about looking for smaller defenders. What the Rockets have to be ready to defend is the constant hunt for a mismatch, as the Lakers use all sorts of different guard-to-guard screening actions to get him a more favorable assignment. That could mean a down screen away from the ball, a handoff, a simple ball screen, and he'll play every role throughout these possessions, from the one using the screen, to the screener, to the one holding the ball while somebody else runs off of one. Needless to say, Houston's gonna have to be sharp at the point of these screens. Every movement has to be intentional, or they run the risk of complete breakdowns. Even just coming out a touch late on a switch could be all it takes for LeBron to explode into a driving lane. Luckily for the Rockets, their roster is loaded with big, athletic wings who can at least bother him to some extent. So for the most part, they shouldn't have much trouble switching across the board, crowding his space, and living with the results. But there are a few guys that I think they'll look for relentlessly, the main one being Reed Sheppard. In my opinion, Sheppard is far and away the biggest X factor in this series for a number of reasons. Starting with the fact that LA's offense is going to be centered around trying to play him off the floor by forcing him into every single action, while the Rockets do everything in their power to at least form a competent defensive structure around his limitations. At the point of screens, I wouldn't be surprised if they try to avoid switches, but like I said, it would have to be intentional and executed to perfection. Reed's shown some ability to hedge or trap in certain situations, and he's got extremely good hands, so he'll make some plays and force some turnovers. For the most part though, I don't think the Lakers would have too much trouble finding the advantage, so it's all about how Houston rotates out of it. If Bron's the one screening, you can't let him get the ball in the short roll, because once he's got a downhill advantage, they're getting a good shot. They need to either ignore the ball handler at times and prioritize the short roll, or send a third defender into the play to meet him early and scramble behind it. Again, they have the personnel to execute. Their wings have elite ground coverage and they're versatile enough to switch out of those positions. If Bron's the one handling the ball, everything depends on who's setting a screen for him. If it's Rui Hachimura, they run the risk of giving up a short mid-range jumper. But more importantly, if Reed's on Rui to begin with, they probably just skip the screen altogether and have him post up. If it's Luke Kennard, there's always the risk of him ghosting a screen and popping out to the three-point line, where he's the most accurate shooter in the entire NBA. And during this most recent stretch, he's shown to be a strong short roll decision maker who can get to a floater or make a few different passing reads. Same with Marcus Smart. I wouldn't be surprised to see Houston funnel some touches his way, just because the shot selection and decision making can get erratic at times. For the most part though, he's a really good passer who can extend advantages. That leaves Jake LaRavia and Jared Vanderbilt. With Vando, I just don't think he's going to get much run in this series. The offensive drawbacks are too prominent, and against a defense of Houston's caliber, there's not much he can do to stay on the court. So I think we'll see Reed get most of his burn against Jake LaRavia. The Rockets should mostly be comfortable putting two on the ball and forcing him to make a decision out of the short roll, because he isn't a dynamic playmaker and doesn't pose much of an in-between scoring threat. That's another chess match to watch. If Reed's on LaRavia, we'll have to see how the Lakers try to get him switched onto one of their more dynamic screeners and how the Rockets avoid it. Either way, LeBron's way too smart of a creator to not mix up the coverages. So while I think we'll see some hedging, some blitzing, maybe even some nexting, they're also going to be forced to switch a lot. Once Bron gets that matchup, Houston has to answer some more questions. Do they try to deny the ball and send help from the weak side? Do they try scram switching to avoid it altogether? Or do they let him get the ball, then crowd that space with help from other areas? Why not all of the above? The one advantage that the Rockets really have working in their favor is that LA's roster isn't loaded with shooters. Obviously, you can't leave Luke Kennard open, and ideally, you don't let Rui get open corner threes, but everybody else is really streaky, and there's no one lineup they can go to that just surrounds LeBron with shooters. That gives the Rockets options, and they've shown throughout the past that they're not afraid to get really aggressive. So if LeBron gets the ball in the post, we'll likely see lots of hard double teams off of those streakier shooters. That could mean a double from up top, one pass away. It could come from his blind side in hopes of forcing a turnover. When they're not doubling, they'll still be plugged into every gap. They're long enough to cover most of the empty space near the paint, which will not only help them keep Bron away from the basket, it'll completely take away the threat of cutters, limiting LA's ability to get their easiest form of offense. Against help, Bron can still get to his own scoring pretty consistently. It's not easy to scheme for brute strength, impeccable timing, and unbelievably quick processing. Not to mention that he's got a deep bag of tricks that allow him to go over the top, like his patented post fade, or the way he'll use up fakes to create little windows. I still think, even at age 41, he can raise the offensive floor just enough to really put some stress on Houston's help. And because he can make every last read as a passer, the margin for error is pretty much non-existent. If there's any defense that has the athletes to make that margin just a little bit larger though, the Rockets might fit the bill. They have a unique ability to cover ground, and they have rim protectors at every position. So regardless of how you get them closing out or scrambling to recover, they can fall back on their length, speed, and verticality as legitimate superpowers. However, even a defense that's elite in rotation is going to have to give up something after committing extra help to the ball. For that reason, I think the second biggest X factor in this series, after Reed Shepherd, is LA's collection of role players. More specifically, the ones who aren't super efficient shooters like Jake LaRavia, Marcus Smart, or Bronny and Kleba if either of them find their way into some games. Not only are these guys going to be expected to knock down threes in pretty tight windows, they're going to be expected to put the ball on the floor in short roll situations or after drawing a closeout. And LA's ability to score in the half court could come down to how they handle that increased load as decision makers. Luckily for them though, there's a slight chance that it actually doesn't even end up mattering that much. And that's because there's so much for them to poke at on the other side of the ball. But before we get into that, I want to thank PrizePicks for sponsoring today's video. If you know you can play responsibly and you have the means to do so, PrizePicks is America's #1 app for sports picks. So if you're looking for a place to get in on the NBA playoff action, use code HMA and get started. The play-in has been electric. Tonight we've got the last two games, starting with what should be a fast-paced duel between the Hornets and the Magic. Kobe White is coming off a big performance, and with the way Orlando defends the three, I think they'll lean on his slashing, so we're taking him for more than 13.5 points. On the other side, we're rocking with the hot hand. Bane dropped 34 against Philly, and I don't think the Hornets can stop him from getting downhill. We'll take him at 19.5 points. And it's that simple. Find the stat you want, pick more or less, and you've got your lineup. If you sign up for PrizePicks with code HMA and play $5, you get $50 in lineups instantly. So download the app or click the link in the description to get started, and let me hear your picks down in the comments. This installment of the Lakers isn't by any means an elite defensive unit, but they're really big. Not just height and lengthwise, they're brute. A bunch of bodies, and that gives them a little bit of flexibility, especially against the Houston Rockets offense that's overly reliant on Kevin Durant's shot making. And when I say overly reliant, that's not an exaggeration. The league's average effective field goal percentage this season was 54.3%. That's the mark to hit to be a positively efficient shot maker. Of Houston's top 10 rotation players, the ones who met that threshold are Amen Thompson by 0.3%, Aaron Holiday and Reed Shepherd by 0.7%, and Kevin Durant by 4.5%. When he's on the court, he quite literally single-handedly turns them into an above-average team shooting the basketball, as opposed to what would be 29th, only ahead of the Brooklyn Nets. His shot making is so important to their offense for a variety of reasons. The first and most prominent one being his ability to ramp up his volume to nearly 20 shots a game while remaining every bit as efficient. That's because he's got one of the most diverse shot profiles we've ever seen. Whether he starts with the ball in the post and turns over either shoulder for a jumper, starts with the ball up top, comes off a screen and drills a pull-up three, or starts away from the ball, runs off an action and hits a jumper while on the move, he's just always automatic. If you can get him the ball where he wants it, you'll have a good offense. That's where the Rockets run into some issues. With the loss of Van Vliet before the season, they've sorely lacked a real ball handling or table setting presence. Sometimes they'll turn to Şengün as the point guard of the offense, and that's when they can get into some movement heavy stuff, running those athletic forwards around screens, freeing guys up on cuts, or getting the ball to KD with an advantage. While that works, at times, Şengün has a few functional limitations that prevent him from getting to that next level, like the fact that he isn't a shooting threat, so opposing bigs are comfortable hanging back in the paint. His handle, His size and his vision allow him to be a viable option, but he's still not the ideal offensive hub, and a lot of times the offense devolves into ugly isolations without a spread floor. Amen Thompson is actually the guy who has the ball in his hands the most. Similar to Şengün though, he's a non-shooting threat who defenses have no problem pulling back on. He can be dangerous downhill, but lacks the handle to navigate those tight spaces, doesn't have any sort of counters to fall back on, and generally lacks the natural point guard feel you'd want from a guy running your offense. That leaves Reed Sheppard, who's in many ways the inverse. He's a lot more turnover averse than either Amen or Şengün, and he poses a serious pull-up shooting threat. His problems are related to size, athleticism, and pace. He just isn't a two-point scoring threat, so when defenses pressure up and funnel him into tighter spaces, he's not able to apply the pressure that's needed from a lead ball handler. Not to mention that he's still not the ideal table setter for a guy like KD. So what ends up happening a lot is that KD gets forced into the role of a pseudo point guard. Remember though, the offense relies on his shot making. If he's initiating, that means they're relying on him to get the ball where he wants it from the backcourt. And this is what LA can really hone in on. By nature of being 6'11" with a 7'5" wingspan, his handle's pretty loose. While he used to have the explosiveness and agility to compensate, at this point he tends to really struggle with pressure. The Lakers like to take advantage of that by having whoever's guarding him press way up, clogging his airspace and limiting his ability to get inside the arc. That's when he's often forced to call for a screen. But LA is just going to either send an outright blitz or switch across the board, then come with some late help or even a double. Those double teams are the backbone of their defensive strategy. We've seen on multiple occasions this season that they're more than comfortable going with an anyone but Durant approach, blitzing him as far out as half court to get the ball out of his hands before he can even pose a threat. In these spots, his decision making can be pretty spotty. It's obvious that he doesn't process the game like a LeBron, for example, so instead of immediately punishing these traps, it can take a second. Sometimes it never happens. When he can't easily use his height to get the ball up over or his length to get the ball around, he can become extremely turnover prone, which really stood out in their matchup on March 16th, where he turned the ball over 7 times. Even after he makes the right read though and creates an advantage, the Rockets aren't always able to make something out of it. They usually like to put Amen one pass away so that he can catch the ball in space and immediately dive to the rim. That works, sometimes, but the Lakers are willing to live with it because they too can pack the paint and give up threes. Actually, to an even more extreme degree than vice versa. The guys who are comfortable making decisions against rotating defenses can't shoot, and the ones who can shoot are limited to just that, outside of Reed Sheppard of course, but we'll get back to him in a sec. The point I'm trying to make is that no matter who the Rockets get the ball to after KD gets doubled, the Lakers are living with it. Even Şengün, as long as they step in front of a drive and don't give up any cuts, the Rockets are going to be forced to funnel shots to unreliable shooters. Remember, their offense relies way too much on KD getting his shots up. Going back to that game on March 16th, he only attempted 3 shots in the fourth quarter, 2 of which were threes, and the Rockets shot 4 of 16 from the field, 1 of 8 from 3, and scored 12 points. 2 nights later, they played again, and this time he only attempted 2 shots, while the Rockets as a team shot 9 of 21 and got outscored by 11 points. They only have 2 pathways to a competent half-court offense. Either they find a way to get the ball to KD in spots where he can immediately take a shot by running him around off-ball screens or getting him the ball in the post, which actually could be something to look into, because like I said earlier, the Lakers are comfortable switching anybody onto him. That doesn't matter on the perimeter, but if he gets the ball 15 feet in, he can turn and shoot with ease. The other pathway is to get enough shooters on the court to actually take advantage of KD being doubled, and that's where Reed Sheppard comes in. There's a reason I called him the biggest X factor in this series. Not only is he their best bet at getting the ball to KD without turning it over, he's an absolute deadeye of a shooter. Since entering the league, he's made 45% of his wide open threes, as well as 40% both off the dribble and off the catch, and he gets them up with extreme volume. This season, he's one of only 6 players in the NBA attempting 10 threes every 75 possessions. So in situations where the Lakers double KD from one pass away or get forced into a scramble, he's the one guy who can actually punish them consistently. Now those Şengün short rolls hold more value, as well as those stampedes from Amen. It benefits every facet of the offense. If the Lakers are able to play him off the floor, I'm really not sure what the Rockets would do. They could always go all in on defense and try to scrape together some buckets. Personally, I'd turn to Aaron Holiday a lot more than they seem to be comfortable doing because he's another reliable shooter who can handle the ball a little bit, but they'd probably just have to look for other offensive avenues, like a Şengün post-up heavy offense, for example. The Lakers are going to be switching a ton, so if you could get a guy like Kennard on Şengün, that's a serious mismatch to attack. That's where LA's brute forward size comes in though. They've got the bodies to throw at him, and they'll always be able to help off the non-shooters. Maybe looking for LA's guards is the move though, a little Uno reverse card. They went to Jabari Smith in the post quite a bit in last year's series against the Warriors. What's stopping them from pushing that button again? I just keep coming back to the fact that they need KD's shot making though. While these are competent options, they aren't great ones. They wouldn't be efficient shooting the ball, and that's coupled with the fact that they're one of the most turnover-prone teams in the league. They're averaging almost 16 turnovers every 100 possessions, good for 28th, ahead of the Nets as well as the Trailblazers. The Lakers have some defensive playmakers, like Marcus Smart, Jake LaRavia, and again, even Bronny James if he gets some burn. If you let them turn defense into easy offense, especially with the league leader in fast break points on the team, they don't need to be an efficient half-court offense to get a lot of points on the board. Luckily for the Rockets, they should have a major advantage in some of these more marginal areas. They're clearly the better defensive team, top to bottom, regardless of who's out there. They're also one of the best rebounding teams in the league. They're more athletic, more physical. They might even throw out some double big units with Capella. I'd be surprised if they didn't dominate the points in the paint battle. But the battle I think they'll need to win is in transition. That could come from one of two ways. If they can turn the Lakers over, another Uno reverse card, they could win the series off of leakouts. In my opinion though, it's even more important for them to make a deliberate effort to grab and go. They know they're going to get stops. If they can speed up the pace of the game and create before the defense gets set, the spacing isn't an issue. Really, this applies to both teams. I think both half-court offenses are going to really struggle in this series. Without KD getting to his spots and rising up, the Rockets just aren't efficient. I could see them especially struggling in late game situations, so they've got to create some margin on the scoreboard. LeBron's going to get to his spots and create advantages, but can their role guys knock down shots or make good decisions consistently against this defense? I don't trust it. So it's going to come down to those other areas. Who gets more points in the paint? Who rebounds better? Who forces more turnovers? And who gets more points in transition? Ultimately, I do tend to lean towards Houston in these situations. For that reason, I'm picking the Rockets to win, if absolutely nothing changes. There's this dark cloud just sort of hanging over Houston right now. It's the Luka Doncic cloud. After a grade 2 left hamstring strain a couple weeks ago, he was ruled out indefinitely. He's out for at least the first few games, but he just got back from a trip to Spain where he got some specialized therapy. The problem is that even in a best case scenario, he probably wouldn't be ready to go until game 6 or 7. And from there, who knows if he'd look like the best version of himself. To be completely honest, I think the Lakers would win this series in 6 if Luka was playing, even without Austin Reaves. So on the off chance he comes back for game 5 and the series is tied at 2 games apiece, they could be in position to bring it home. I just don't think that's going to happen. Instead, I think we're going to see a series where LA relies on LeBron finding a mismatch. Best case scenario, they find a way to play Reed Shepherd off the court, at least a little bit. Their role players are going to have to hit their open threes, and more importantly, they're going to have to make good decisions against rotations. On defense, they need to make anybody but KD beat them while not giving up cuts or second chance opportunities. If they can force turnovers while making a deliberate effort to get out and run, they have a chance to win this series. As for the Rockets, they're going to have to execute well at the point of guard-to-guard screening actions and take away the paint from LeBron while defending the three-point line. They need to find a way to keep Reed on the court while getting the ball to KD in advantageous spots. From there, they've got to take care of the ball, win both the rebounding and transition battles, and build a big enough series margin to not even worry about a return from Luka. All things considered, this isn't going to be an easy path to the second round. LeBron's looked amazing recently, and the Lakers have a lot to poke at. But in a scenario where I'm expecting both half-court offenses to struggle, it's hard not to prefer the bigger, more athletic team who's just much better on defense and on the glass. So instead of Lakers in 6, I'm going with Rockets in 6, making it to the second round of the playoffs for the first time in 6 years.